Have you ever felt it? That cold spot in an otherwise warm room. The sudden, prickling certainty that you are not alone, even when the house is empty and the doors are locked. Most people dismiss it. A draft, nerves, an overactive imagination. But you know better, don't you? You're here because a part of you knows the truth. The dead don't always stay dead. Tonight, we listen to the ones who stopped dismissing it. The ones who looked into the darkness and saw something looking back. These aren't just stories. They are warnings. My wife Sarah and I bought the old McGregor house on a whim. It was ridiculously underpriced. A beautiful two-story Victorian on the edge of town that had been on the market for years. Structural issues, the realtor mumbled, but we were young, dumb, and in love with its Gothic charm. The first few weeks were blissful. We painted walls, sanded floors, and dreamed of the family we'd raise within them. The first sign that something was wrong was subtle. We'd leave a room and come back to find a window open. Not just unlocked, but wide open. We blamed faulty latches, the house settling. Then my tools started moving. I'd set a hammer down on the workbench in the basement, turn to grab a nail, and the hammer would be gone. I'd find it later, placed neatly on a shelf on the other side of the room. Sarah thought I was losing my mind, just stressed from the renovation. I started to believe it myself until the night she heard the music. It was faint, a tinny melody like an old music box, seeming to drift down from the attic. I went up to check, armed with a flashlight and a growing sense of dread. The attic was a cavern of dust and forgotten things, but there was no music box. Just an old, rocking horse perfectly still in the beam of my light. As I turned to leave, I heard it. A soft, wooden creak from behind me. I spun around. The rocking horse was gently swaying back and forth as if a small child had just pushed off from the floor. We tried to ignore it. We tried to live with it. But it kept escalating. Whispers in the hallways at night. So faint you'd think it was the wind. The scent of lavender, Sarah's grandmother's perfume, would suddenly fill a room and then vanish. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps pacing the upstairs hallway when we were both downstairs. One night, we were watching a movie when we heard a crash from the kitchen. We ran in to find every single cabinet door wide open, their contents spilled onto the floor. But nothing was broken. It was just displayed. We called a paranormal investigation team. They set up cameras, EMF meters, audio recorders. They told us the activity was off the charts, especially in the attic and the nursery. They captured a voice, a little girl's voice, whispering a single word over and over again on their audio recorders. Mine. The final straw was the handprint. We woke up one morning to find a small, child-sized handprint on the inside of our bedroom window, which was on the second floor. It was as if someone had been standing outside, looking in. We moved out a week later. We sold the house at a loss to a developer who planned to tear it down. Sometimes I drive by the empty lot where it used to stand. The developer went bankrupt before the project started. The land is just overgrown with weeds now. But sometimes on cold nights, I swear I can still see the silhouette of a house that isn't there, and a single light shining in the attic window. I work the night shift as a security guard at a medical research facility. It's a modern building, all glass and steel, the last place you'd expect to be haunted. Most nights are painfully boring. I do my rounds, check the labs, watch the monitors, and try to stay awake. It was on my third month that things started to get weird. I was in the main monitoring station, a small room with a wall of screens showing feeds from all over the building. It was about 3 a.m., the dead hour. I was watching the feed for Lab C, the cryogenics lab. It's always kept at a ridiculously low temperature, and it's filled with large stainless steel cryo tanks. Suddenly, on the screen, I saw one of the heavy tank lids lift up a few inches and then slam back down. There was no sound, of course, just the silent video. I rewound it, watched it again. It wasn't a glitch. My heart started hammering. I called my supervisor, a guy named Dave, who'd been there for 20 years. He just sighed and said, "Yeah, that's just Dr. Alistair. He doesn't like being disturbed." He told me the story. Dr. Alistair Finch was one of the founding researchers, a brilliant but obsessive man who had a fatal heart attack in that very lab 20 years ago. The official story was a heart attack. The rumor was he was experimenting on himself, trying to achieve cryostasis. After that, I started noticing more. The elevator would go up to the third floor. The executive floor, which was locked and empty at night, and then come back down on its own. I'd hear the distinct sound of a keyboard clacking away in an empty office. I learned to live with it, to accept it as part of the job. But one night I made a mistake. I was doing my rounds and passed by Lab C. On an impulse, I used my key card and went inside. The cold was instantaneous, biting. The air hummed with the sound of the machinery. I walked between the massive tanks, my breath pluming in front of me. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe just to prove to myself it was all in my head. I stopped in front of the tank I'd seen move on the monitor. Its lid was sealed tight. A plaque on the side read, Specimen 001. Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered and went out, plunging me into absolute darkness. My radio crackled to life with a blast of static. Then a voice, cold and raspy, came through the speaker right next to my ear. Get out! I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled for the door, fumbling with my keycard in the dark. As the door hissed open, the lights flickered back on. I glanced back into the lab. On the side of the tank, a new layer of frost had formed, and traced into it, as if by a finger, were two words, My Lab. I never went back in there again. And now, whenever I watch the monitor for Lab C, I make sure the volume is turned off. I don't want to hear what Dr. Allister might have to say next. When I was 10, my best friend Catherine lived in an old 2-story house at the end of a dirt road, completely surrounded by woods. The house itself always gave me the creeps. The paint was peeling, and the shutters looked like they were barely hanging on. But the inside was surprisingly nice, so I always shrugged off my uneasy feeling. The first time I stayed the night, the strangeness began. We were in her room watching a movie when the door across from us slammed shut. We giggled, blaming the wind. But then it creaked open and slammed shut again, harder this time. I asked her, "Do you think it's just your mom?" She shook her head and whispered something that still chills me to my core. "My mom isn't home. It's just you and me." My blood ran cold. I had met her mom earlier that day. A woman had been standing in the entryway when I arrived, just staring at me with wide, unnerving eyes. But who was that lady staring at me when I got here? As the words left my mouth, we heard shuffling from the room directly above us. An attic. Catherine's face went white. "This happens every day," she whispered, her voice trembling. Then she told me the story of the house. Years ago, it had been a daycare. A woman who ran it had a breakdown, locked all the children in the attic, and then she ended her own life in the kitchen. The children were never found for months. My heart was pounding. "It's true," Catherine said, tears welling in her eyes. "I've seen them, the little kids, every day, but I've never seen the lady. You have. She was the one you saw earlier." I don't remember much after that. Just grabbing Catherine's hand and running out of the house, not stopping until we were out in the yard, gasping for air under the cold moonlight. Years have passed. I'm 27 now. That was the last day I ever saw or heard from Catherine. I tried to find her, to look her up online, but there's no trace of her. No proof she ever existed. All our mutual friends from that time are still in my life, but not her. It's as if she was a ghost herself. I've driven by that old house maybe a dozen times over the years. It's still there, looking even more decrepit. And I always wonder, what happened in that house? And was Catherine just another one of the children who never made it out? The first rule of urban exploration is you never go alone. The second is you always respect the dead. My friends and I broke both. We'd heard rumors about the old St. Vincent's Asylum, abandoned for 50 years on the outskirts of the city. Stories of electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and a cruel head nurse named Matron Blackwood who reportedly tortured patients. We found a way in through a broken basement window. The air inside was thick and heavy with the smell of decay and mildew. We explored the patient wards, the rusted bed frames still lining the walls. We found the old operating theater, a single stained table sitting under a massive, dusty surgical lamp. It was creepy, but it was just an old, derelict building. Then we found Blackwood's office. Her name was still on the door. Inside, her desk was still there, a leather-bound patient log sitting open on its surface. My friend, Jake, a professional idiot, picked it up and started reading the entries aloud in a mocking, quavering voice. Patient 4B exhibits extreme paranoia. Prescribed immediate hydrotherapy. He laughed, but the rest of us were uneasy. "Put it back, Jake," I said. "Don't be disrespectful." He just grinned and continued. Matron Blackwood notes a general defiance among the populace. Recommends stricter disciplinary measures. As he said her name, the heavy office door slammed shut, plunging us into near darkness. We all jumped. The only light was from our flashlights, dancing frantically around the room. We tried the door. It was locked, or stuck. It wouldn't budge. Panic started to set in. Then from the hallway we heard it. The squeak of old rubber wheels on linoleum. A trolley! It was slow, rhythmic, getting closer and closer. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It stopped right outside the door. Silence. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Then a voice, a woman's voice, sharp and cold as ice, spoke from the other side of the door. "It's time for your treatment." We started screaming, throwing ourselves against the door. Suddenly, it swung open with a crash, and we tumbled out into the empty hallway. There was no one there. No trolley. We didn't wait to investigate. We ran. We scrambled out of the basement window and didn't stop running until the asylum was a dark shape in the distance. When we got back to the car, Jake was pale and shaking. He opened his hand. He was holding a small, rusty object. It was an old syringe needle. He swore he didn't take it, that it just appeared in his pocket. We never went back. But sometimes, when I'm trying to sleep, I can still hear it. The squeak of wheels on a linoleum floor getting closer and closer. My family and I moved into a new house that had a sealed-off attic. For the first few months, I'd occasionally hear scratching from the roof. I dismissed it as birds or squirrels. But the scratching grew worse, more frequent, more desperate. It sounded like something was trying to claw its way out. One day, my sister noticed the seal on the attic entrance just outside her room was broken. My dad was confused. He checked it and found it was incredibly difficult to open and close. Whatever had opened it had to be strong. That night, I went to get a late-night snack from the fridge and found my favorite chips were gone. The next morning, my parents were frantic. A whole cake, meant for my niece's birthday, had vanished from the counter. My curiosity finally got the better of me. When no one was home, I grabbed a ladder, a flashlight, and a kitchen knife just in case. My heart pounded as I pushed open the heavy attic hatch. I shined my flashlight into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing but dust and cobwebs. But as I swept the beam across the space, I saw it. The empty cake box, my empty chip packets, a pile of dirty clothes, and in the far corner, a short, dark silhouette that froze in the light. It wasn't an animal. It was humanoid. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stared, and it stared back. I don't know how long we were locked in that silent standoff. Then I bolted. I slammed the hatch closed, scrambled down the ladder, and ran. I told my parents everything. They went up to check, but whatever it was gone. We moved out a month later. I still have nightmares about that dark silhouette frozen in my flashlight beam. I don't know what it was, or how it got into our sealed attic. I only know one thing for sure. We weren't just sharing our house with a ghost. We were sharing it with something that was living, breathing, and hungry. Over the course of 2 years, I had these recurring, terrifying dreams about a creature in the attic. It always felt deeply malevolent. I'm someone who's usually aware I'm dreaming, lucid, but these dreams were different. They felt real. In one dream, I was playing video games when I saw an arm dangling from the open attic hatch beckoning me closer. I refused, but it just kept waving, trying to lure me up. In another, I was in a strange house with my sister and nieces, and I knew this thing was threatening them. I confronted it for the first time, a woman with light purple skin and dreadlocks. I don't remember how that dream ended, but the most intense dream, the one that made me terrified of attics to this day, happened a year ago. I was in bed, and the attic hatch was directly above me. I was paralyzed, aware that it was watching me. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. I was wrong. Slowly, it pulled the covers off me. I lay there, cold and petrified, trying to decide what to do. Then it grabbed me by the throat. It lifted me a foot off the bed and started choking me. The pressure was immense, real. My lungs felt like they were going to burst. Just as I was about to black out, it let go. I fell back onto the bed, gasping for air. I haven't had a dream about it since. I hope it's because it got bored with me and left me alone forever. But now I can't even walk under an attic door without glancing up, my body tensed, expecting to see it again. I tell myself it was just my subconscious, my brain creating a monster. But what if it wasn't? What if it's a real entity, and what if one night I don't wake up from the dream? My older sister and I were heading downstairs to bed at our brother's house. It was about 10 o'clock at night. As we passed the switch for the attic light, we noticed it was on. The attic was just a small, dusty storage room at the end of the stairs, so I switched it off. As I did, we both heard the exact voice of our mom say, "Turn on that light. I'm up here." We were so certain it was her that I didn't hesitate. I just flipped the switch back on and we continued downstairs. We opened the door to the main living area and our blood ran cold. There was our mom, sitting on the couch, drinking tea with our other brother, the TV quietly murmuring in the background. We just froze in the doorway, unable to speak. She noticed our expressions and asked what was wrong. After a long moment of silence, we explained what had happened. She didn't say anything, just told us to go to sleep. Of course, I couldn't. I lay awake all night, my mind racing. Who or what made that sound? And how did it mimic my mother's voice so perfectly that it fooled both me and my sister? It's a voice I've known my entire life. To this day, whenever I ask my sister if she remembers that night, she just says yes, and immediately changes the subject. I've been up in that attic 100 times since, and nothing strange has ever happened. But I always think about that voice, and I wonder if we had gone up there thinking it was our mom, what would we have found waiting for us in the dark? I was about 7 years old when we moved into the apartment that terrified me. Strange things started happening almost immediately. Things would go missing only to reappear in plain sight. We'd hear footsteps in the hallways when everyone was asleep. One time, my dad heard what sounded like a small child running. Thinking it was my sister, he called out her name, but got no answer. When he went to check on us, he found both of us fast asleep in our shared room. The weirdest things involved food. One night, my mom baked a cake. Later that night, we all heard muffled chewing sounds coming from the kitchen. My parents were already in bed. The next morning, half the cake was gone. Another time, my dad bought a brand new GPS. He was so proud of it and placed it on the dining room table. The next day, it was gone. We all denied touching it. A week passed, and then one morning it was just back, sitting right where he had left it. But the thing that truly haunts me, the thing that makes me question my own memories, was the saint. It was a little paper icon of a saint that someone had given me. I didn't like it. It creeped me out, so I got rid of it. I ripped it into tiny pieces and threw it in the trash. The next day it was back on my desk, perfectly whole. I shredded it. It came back. I burned it. It came back. No matter how many times I destroyed it, it would always return, sitting on my desk as if nothing had happened. I no longer live in that house, but every time I walk by that building, I get this deep feeling of dread. And I think about that paper saint. Was it a miracle? Or was something in that house playing a game with me, showing me that no matter what I did, it was in control? The house had been in my family for generations, a remote farmhouse in the North Dakota plains. It's where my grandpa passed away. Since then, odd things have been happening. Doors opening on their own, strange sounds, the usual creepy stuff you hear about. But it got worse. One day, I was in the woods clearing dead trees when I heard 3 distinct gunshots close by. I hit the ground, but there was no one around. The next day, my 5-year-old daughter and I were in the house. She was playing, and I was cleaning. Suddenly, she stood up and said, "I want to go home." As I followed her out, she asked me to go back and get her toy train. When I stepped back inside, the world had shifted. It was freezing cold, so cold I could see my breath. The colors of the house were different, muted, almost gray. A deep sense of dread washed over me. I grabbed the train and ran. As I left, I heard thumping sounds on the walls, like something was trying to get out. Later, I asked my daughter what she had seen. She said she saw a man with a pointy hat in the house. That night, I took pictures of the house from the outside. In one of the windows, I could see it. A shadow figure with a pointed hat looking right at me. A pastor told me what I was describing, the change in temperature, the muted colors. It was a sign of demonic activity. We had the house blessed and things were quiet for a while. But they started again, and they got worse. We found a dead coyote in the locked workshop, a cow with a broken neck in the corral. And whenever I'm on the property, I get these phantom stabbing pains in the palm of my left hand. I don't know what the pointed hat demon is. I don't know the significance of the 3 gunshots. My grandpa was an avid hunter. Maybe it was a warning from him. All I know is that things are getting worse, and I'm afraid. What happens when blessing the house isn't enough? My family had a knack for finding haunted houses. We were a military family, so we moved a lot. One base in Virginia, we lived in a newer house, but it had something in it. I always felt like something was standing right behind me, that feeling you get in horror movies just before the jump scare. For fun, I called the ghost Johnny. One night I was lying in bed and heard frantic pacing from the attic, like someone was panicking. My mom and I decided to investigate. She stuck her head up into the attic and immediately asked my dad if he'd put the Christmas decorations up there. He had. As soon as she took the boxes down, the activity settled. It seemed Johnny just wanted his space left alone. We moved to another house on the same base a while later. One day my mom told me she'd had a strange dream. She was in the dining room of our old house, and a little boy in 18th century clothing was sitting at the table. He looked up at her, and he had blood coming from his eyes and mouth. In the dream, she started yelling at him to leave. She said he looked startled and replied, "But I don't want to leave." It was just a weird dream, but it stuck with me. On a hunch, I looked up old diseases from that time period. I looked up yellow fever. I didn't expect to find anything, but what I found was chilling. Not only had there been a massive yellow fever epidemic in that area in the 1800s, but the disease had 2 stages. If you got the second, more severe stage, the symptoms included bleeding from the eyes and mouth. Johnny wasn't a soldier. Johnny was a little boy who died of a terrible disease. He wasn't trying to scare us. He was just a child, trapped in his room, who didn't want his space to be disturbed, and he didn't want to leave. My wife and I rented a cabin in Divide, Colorado for our anniversary. Our last night there, it started to snow. We were lying in bed when we clearly heard footsteps on the front porch. Slow, heavy steps crunching in the fresh snow. I got up to check, but there was no one there. I looked out all the windows, nothing. The weird part was the snow on the porch was completely untouched. There were no prints. I got back in bed, unnerved. It happened again. Footsteps right outside the door. I got up again, looked everywhere. Still nothing. No tracks, no sign of anyone or anything. It happened a 3rd time. I couldn't explain it. Then we heard a rustling noise coming from the roof, like something large dragging itself across the shingles. It happened a couple of times. I thought about going outside to look to see what was making the noise, but I didn't. I just locked the door, went back to bed, and listened to the footsteps on the porch and the scraping on the roof until the sun came up. I'm a believer in Bigfoot, and my first thought was, maybe it was something like that. But Bigfoot leaves prints. Whatever was outside our cabin that night didn't. This happened a few years ago. I was left alone at my family's cabin on a mountain. In the middle of winter, while everyone else went Christmas shopping, I was playing games on my phone when I saw a shadow in my peripheral vision. I brushed it off as my imagination. About an hour later, I saw it again. This time it stayed for a few seconds before disappearing. Creeped out, I locked my bedroom door. Immediately after, I heard crying from the 2nd floor. At first, I thought it was my little sister. She was only 3 and cried a lot. I called out, "What's wrong? Did you hurt yourself?" A little girl's voice answered, "Yes, I fell while playing with my dolls. Can you come upstairs and help me?" I unlocked my door and started for the stairs. And then it hit me. I was alone in the cabin. Whatever was upstairs was not my sister. I didn't even grab a coat. I sprinted out of the cabin in just a t-shirt and slippers into the freezing cold. I stopped about 150 meters away and looked back at the cabin. In one of the upstairs windows, I could see a shadow just standing still. And even though I couldn't see any eyes, I could feel it staring at me. I stood there, crying in the freezing cold for 30 minutes until my family finally got back. I never told them what really happened. I refused to go back inside. I've never gone back to that cabin. I still have nightmares about that shadow figure in the window and that little girl's voice asking me to come upstairs. When I was in 4th grade, we moved into a century-old farmhouse in Strawtown, Indiana. The house always felt like someone was watching you. My mom started seeing a black shadow around the house. She said she could even smell him, a distinct body odor in certain spots. Then she started seeing the imprint of someone sitting on the edge of her bed. One night, she woke up with something heavy laying across her legs. My brother had it worse. One night, he woke up screaming. He'd been smacked across the face. We thought he might have hit himself in his sleep, but the handprint on his cheek was upside down. It was impossible. Years later, my mom told me the truth. She'd found him crying on the stairs one night when he was about 10. He told her that he kept hearing voices telling him to kill all of us. The youngest brother, who was only about 3, would talk about the boots walking around the house with no body attached. He'd hear laughing near the basement steps. It got to the point where all 4 of us would kneel on the floor and pray for whatever was in the house to leave us alone. The final straw was one morning when my mom and youngest brother were napping. The bed and the dresser started shaking violently. There was no earthquake. They were just shaking on their own. My mom said it felt like we were being intimidated, told to get out. We did. We moved out shortly after that. A neighbor told us that everyone who ever moved into that house moved out within a few months. It's empty now. I still drive by sometimes, and I want to go back to confront whatever is in there and get answers. But I don't. Because a part of me is afraid that those voices my brother heard are still there, waiting. I'm a real estate agent. I had clients, let's call them Jim and Pam, who were looking for a house. A property popped up that matched their requirements and was suspiciously underpriced. I went to check it out before their showing. When I walked in, I got a weird feeling. I was turning on lights when I came to the kitchen. The refrigerator door was wide open. I shut it, gave it a tug, and it seemed to seal just fine. I figured the last agent just left it open. Then, the house intercom buzzed with static. It came from the receiver in the basement. I went downstairs to check it out. As I got to the basement, the static stopped and the intercom upstairs started buzzing. I ran back up. The static stopped as I got close, but then I saw the kitchen. My heart stopped. Every single cupboard, every drawer, and the refrigerator were all wide open. I slammed everything shut just as Jim and Pam pulled up. I tried to act normal as I gave them the tour. Nothing else happened, but when I asked them how they felt about the house, they both agreed that something felt off, dark. We didn't write an offer. I never went back to that house, but I did check the property history later. The previous owner, a man in his 50s, had died of a sudden heart attack, right there, in the kitchen. My friends lived in a rental house a few doors down that they swore was haunted. Things would move, disappear, reappear. I was skeptical, of course. One day I walked over to their house. As I reached for the side doorknob, I saw it twist on its own, and the door opened a few inches. I thought it was them, so I waited. Nothing. I pushed the door open, called out a hello, and walked in. The house was empty. Their car was gone. As I was about to leave, I heard a baby crying. It was coming from their bedroom. I walked cautiously towards the room, the crying getting louder. I pushed the bedroom door open. The crying stopped. The room was empty. There was no baby. I got out of there so fast. They moved out a few months later. They told me that was the kind of thing that happened all the time, but they never told me they heard a baby. They didn't have any kids, and neither did the neighbors. I still wonder who or what was crying in that empty room. I'm a part-time custodian for my town. Last winter, I was working a few nights at the old middle school I attended as a kid. It's an old building from the 60s. On the first night, I was cleaning the science wing. All the teachers had gone home, the doors were locked, and the lights were out. My system is to leave the lights on in a room if I need to go back to it. One classroom needed a good mopping, so I left the lights on and the door open. About an hour later, I came back with my mop bucket. The door was shut, the lights were off, and it was locked. I know for a fact I didn't do that. I unlocked it, flipped the lights on, and went to ask my coworker on the first floor if he'd been upstairs. He hadn't. I went back to the classroom. The lights were off again. I can't explain it. The third night was worse. I had this constant feeling of being followed. I was cleaning the faculty bathrooms when the women's room door, which always stays, propped open a bit, slammed shut with incredible force. I jumped, my heart racing. I shouted to see if anyone was there. Silence. Then, I heard faint whispers, coming from all around me. I asked them to speak up. They went silent. Later that night, as I was finishing up with my coworker, I looked back down a long, dark hallway, and I saw it. A dark gray, transparent, person-shaped figure walked from left to right down the hall and disappeared around a corner. I ran after it, pretending I thought it was a real person, but I knew what I saw. The building was empty. The woman who normally cleans that wing has worked there for 11 years and says she's never experienced anything. She doesn't believe in ghosts. I think maybe they were just starved for attention. And for a few nights, they got it. I've had a few paranormal experiences, but this one has stuck with me. A few years ago, my friends and I were bored and decided to go explore a creepy, abandoned house in the middle of nowhere. It was about 3 a.m., and the full moon lit everything up. My boyfriend at the time kicked the door open. I made it about 6 feet inside before I was hit with this heavy, cold feeling. It was like being wrapped in a thick, freezing blanket. I got out of there fast. My boyfriend and our friend Tim went on to explore and record a video. We were all hanging out back at the car later, and we watched the video. After laughing at my boyfriend screaming when Tim threw something at him, Tim said he thought he heard something weird. We played it back. As they're running out of the house, scrambling and yelling, you can hear it. Underneath their noise, there's another voice. A woman's voice. And it says, clear as day, she died here. We all lost our minds. I was the only girl there that night, and I had been outside for a good 10 minutes by that point. My voice wouldn't have been on the recording. I wish I still had the video, but I don't. I used to be terrified of the paranormal, so I deleted it not long after. But I'll never forget that voice. And I'll never forget what it said. Who died? There? And why did she want us to know? Thanks for sticking with us through the shadows. If these stories have left you with a chill, remember to check your locks and maybe leave a light on tonight. If you've enjoyed this journey into the unknown, please show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and ringing the notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into darkness. Do you have a story of your own? A warning for the rest of us? Share it in the comments below. You never know who might be listening. Until next time, stay safe and try not to listen too closely to the sounds you hear in the night. You might not like what you find.